Have you ever found yourself signing something important? Maybe, a job contract, a big loan, or yes, an insurance policy. And you look at all those pages and think, wow, I really should read every single word here.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, who actually does that? We've all been there, right?
Absolutely. You glance, you sign, you hope for the best.
Exactly.
Mm.
But what if those really dry-looking documents are actually full of crucial details, maybe even some surprising insights that could seriously impact your finances or, your health? Okay, let's unpack this then. Today, we're doing a deep dive. We've got excerpts from a very specific document, the policy wording for Kotak Group Smart Cash.
Right.
Think of it as a case study, really, a good example of how these things are structured and the kind of vital info they contain.
And our mission today is pretty straightforward. We want to take this dense text, which can feel really legalistic, and just translate it. Turn it into clear, actionable insights for you. We'll look at key definitions, the benefits, the exclusions, all the important stuff.
Yeah, the goal is to help you feel much more clued in about how policies like this actually work. Turn that complex language into something digestible.
Exactly. Valuable knowledge, not just jargon.
Okay, so to really get a handle on any insurance policy, you first have to speak its language.
Right. That's the starting point.
And this document, like most, starts by defining its terms very carefully. And some of these definitions are, way more specific than you might expect.
And it's that specificity, that precise detail that's absolutely key. Take the word accident, for example. In the policy, it's not just any old mishap. It's defined as a sudden, unforeseen, and involuntary event caused by external, visible, and violent means.
Wow, violent means. That's quite specific.
It is. And the crucial thing for you to understand is if what happened doesn't tick all those boxes, sudden, unforeseen, involuntary, external, visible, and violent, your claim might not fly.
So an accident in everyday chat isn't necessarily an accident for insurance purposes.
Precisely. It's a legal term here.
Okay, that's a really strict definition.
Yeah.
And speaking of strict, what about hospital? It's not just any clinic, is it?
No, definitely not. This policy has very concrete criteria. It needs at least 10 inpatient beds in towns, having a population of less than 1 million.
10 beds, okay.
And at least 15 inpatient beds in all other places. So bigger towns, more beds needed.
That's a really practical detail you need to know.
It really is. And it raises that question, doesn't it? Does your local hospital, your preferred place, actually meet that definition? Especially if you're in a smaller town.
Good point.
And the policy also clearly defines Ayush Hospital and Ayush Daycare Center. It specifically includes traditional Indian medicine systems, yoga, naturopathy, Unani, Siddha, homeopathy.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, but again, with criteria, like needing at least 5 inpatient beds and having a qualified Ayush medical practitioner in charge, round the clock.
So these definitions really matter. How do they then shape what kind of conditions are actually covered?
Well, the document makes a clear distinction. You've got an acute condition, that's something expected to respond quickly to treatment, you make a full recovery.
Right.
And then there's a chronic condition that needs ongoing monitoring, maybe long-term control or rehab. It sort of continues indefinitely or keeps coming back.
Okay, acute versus chronic. Makes sense.
And another really key term is medically necessary treatment. This isn't just any treatment you want. It has 4 strict criteria. It has to be prescribed by a medical practitioner. It needs to conform to professional standards, things like that.
And who counts as a medical practitioner?
Good question. The definition lists various recognized medical councils. But, and this is interesting, it explicitly excludes you, the insured person, and your immediate family from being the prescribing practitioner for your own claim.
Right, avoids a conflict of interest, I suppose.
Exactly. It's an ethical safeguard built in.
Okay, and here's a detail I bet many people miss. What about relapses?
Yes. If an illness comes back within 45 days from the date of last consultation, the policy treats it as part of the same illness claim. Any one illness, they call it.
45 days. So if you have, say, a limit on how much the policy pays per illness.
That 45-day rule could mean you hit your limit faster if the illness recurs quickly. It really links episodes together.
That detail really does highlight the precision, doesn't it? Okay, so we've talked about the language, the definitions. Let's shift gears now. What does this policy actually do for you? Let's talk about the benefits. This one is mainly a daily cash type of policy.
That's the core of it, yes. The main benefits are the hospital daily cash benefit. Pretty straightforward. Then there's an accident daily cash benefit, which kicks in if you're hospitalized specifically because of an injury from an accident.
Okay.
And finally, the ICU daily cash benefit. As you'd expect, this pays a higher daily amount if you need intensive care.
And you can choose which of these you want, like pick and mix.
Exactly. You can pick just one or maybe a combination or even all three of those base covers when you set up the policy.
Okay, but wait. Here's something that sounds really important. What if you qualify for more than one on the same day? Say you're in the ICU after an accident. Do you get both the accident cash and the ICU cash?
Ah, great question. And the answer is no. This is a critical rule. The document is very explicit. There will be no cumulative payout under these three benefits, and only the highest of the payout applicable will be paid.
Okay, so no stacking the benefits. You
Yep.
just get the single highest amount you're eligible for on any given day.
Precisely. It's a common point of confusion, actually.
Yeah.
So in your example, accident, then ICU. Let's say accident daily cash is 2,000 rupees and ICU daily cash is 3,000.
Uh-huh.
On the days you're in the ICU, you'd get the 3,000 rupees, the higher ICU benefit, not 2,000 plus 3,000.
Got it.
And the policy even gives examples, like if you're in a normal room for 4 days after an accident, then ICU for 6 days. For each specific day, they look at what applies accident cash, maybe ICU cash, and pay the highest one for that day after any deductible, of course.
And speaking of the deductible or deductible franchise, as they call it here, how does that work with moving between rooms?
Good point. It's applied only once on the entire duration of the stay in the hospital.
Only once for the whole stay?
Yep. Regardless of whether you move from a regular room to ICU and back again, it's not like you pay a new deductible every time you change rooms or something.
Okay, that's clear. So those are the base daily cash benefits. But you mentioned optional covers.
Yes, and this is where the policy gets much more tailored. There's a whole range of optional covers that offer extra lump sum payments or reimbursements for specific things.
This is where you can sort of customize it to your needs.
Exactly. For instance, there's a convalescence benefit that gives you a lump sum if you're in the hospital for a minimum stretch, say 7 or 10 days, helps with recovery costs back home.
That sounds useful.
Or how about the companion benefit? It pays a daily amount if someone needs to stay with you in the hospital.
Oh, like a family member?
Specifically, yes. The policy lists spouse, children, siblings, or parents as eligible companions.
Interesting. And there are others too.
Oh, yeah. There's even a joint hospitalization benefit. That pays a lump sum if 2 or more insured family members end up hospitalized at the same time.
Okay.
And a parent accommodation benefit that's specifically for a parent staying with their hospitalized child, if the child is 12 or under.
These really do cover very specific situations.
They do. And then there are benefits tied to medical procedures. You can opt for a daycare procedure benefit. That covers procedures that take less than 24 hours of hospitalization, things like cataract surgery or chemotherapy, usually from a specific list in the policy annexure.
Right, short procedures.
And separate from that, there's a general surgery benefit for other more significant inpatient surgical procedures. So it distinguishes between minor daycare stuff and bigger surgeries.
Okay. Now you mentioned accident benefits earlier. Is it just the daily cash or is there more?
There's definitely more, especially in the optional covers. Beyond the accident daily cash, you can get an accidental hospitalization benefit. This one works more like traditional health insurance. It reimburses actual medical expenses incurred due to that accidental hospitalization up to a certain limit.
Ah, reimbursement, not just cash per day.
Exactly. And then it gets really specific. There are payouts for broken bones and burns.
Broken bones and burns, how does that work?
It pays a percentage of the sum insured based on the severity and location. For example, a compound skull fracture with brain damage pays out 100% of the sum insured.
Wow.
And similarly, for burns, third-degree burns covering 20% or more of your body surface area also trigger a 100% payout. It shows how it can provide significant support for really serious injuries.
That's quite detailed. What about other life events?
Yep, the policy covers some of those too, optionally. There's a maternity benefit and a newborn baby benefit, both providing daily cash during hospitalization for childbirth.
Standard maternity cover, basically.
Pretty standard structure, yes. And for those who travel, there's an optional worldwide cover. This provides the daily cash benefit even if you need medically necessary hospitalization outside India.
Useful for travelers, definitely.
A reminder that, yeah, health needs don't stop at the border.
Okay, and then there are broader coverages too, right? Like personal accident.
Yes, there's a main personal accident benefit. This pays a lump sum in case of accidental death or for permanent total disablement.
And again, permanent total disablement probably has a very precise definition.
Absolutely. It's not vague. It specifically means things like losing the use of both eyes or both hands or both feet or maybe one hand and one foot. Very clearly defined triggers.
Right. Not just unable to work, it's about specific physical losses.
Exactly. And finally, one of the big ones, the critical illness benefit.
Ah, yes, critical illness cover.
This provides a lump sum payment if you're diagnosed for the first time with one of a list of specific severe conditions. The examples given are cancer of specified severity, kidney failure needing regular dialysis, stroke, or a first heart attack of specified severity.
Okay, a lump sum to help cope with a major diagnosis.
Exactly. And this benefit also works worldwide, which is good. But, important note, it typically has a waiting period, usually 90 days from when the cover starts.
90 days. So you can't, get diagnosed the day after you buy the policy and expect a payout.
Correct. That's a pretty standard feature for critical illness covers across the board.
Okay, so we've explored the benefits, the things a policy gives you, but honestly, sometimes the most important part is knowing what it doesn't cover.
Absolutely. Understanding the exclusions and waiting periods is just as crucial, if not more so. This is often where people run into problems.
Yeah, nasty surprises you want to avoid. So what are the big ones here?
Well, the pre-existing diseases exclusion, or PED, is always major. In this policy, it's typically a 36-month waiting period.
3 years.
3 years of continuous coverage before conditions you already had when you bought the policy are covered.
That's a long time.
It is. But the key takeaway, and it's a positive one, is that this can often be reduced or waived if you're porting in from another policy with continuous coverage. Portability norms really help here.
Okay, so prior coverage counts. What else?
There's also a general 30 days waiting period for any illness claim right after the policy starts.
Just 30 days.
Yes, for most illnesses. The exception is accidents. Those are covered from day one.
Oh.
But for sickness, there's that initial 30-day wait.
Got it. No quick claims for minor illnesses right at the start.
Exactly. And then there's another waiting period, the specified disease procedure waiting period.
Specified diseases like what?
This is usually a list of common conditions or procedures, things like cataracts, hernia, arthritis, maybe gallstones or kidney stones. For these specific things, there's often a 12-month wait.
12 months. So even if it's not pre-existing, you still have to wait a year for coverage on those specific things.
Correct. And here's an important point. What if something falls under both PED and the specified disease list?
Oh, right. Which waiting period applies?
The policy says the longer of the two waiting periods will apply. So the insurer takes the more cautious time frame.
Okay. Makes sense from their perspective. What about maternity?
Maternity benefit also usually has a waiting period, typically 9 months from the policy start date. Again, pretty standard and often waivable on renewal or if you port the policy.
Right. So those are waiting periods. What about things that are just never covered? Permanent exclusions.
Yes, and the list here is quite comprehensive. It includes expenses purely for investigation and evaluation, so diagnostic tests done without subsequent treatment or hospitalization might not be covered.
Just tests alone, maybe not.
Okay, also excluded. Rest cure, rehabilitation, and respite care. And importantly, any treatment needed because you were involved in a breach of law with criminal intent.
Okay. Committing a crime voids the cover for related injuries. Seems fair.
Seems fair. What's also striking are some of the lifestyle-related exclusions.
Like what?
Hazardous or adventure sports. Things like parajumping, rock climbing, motor racing, scuba diving, they're explicitly out.
Unless
you've specifically paid extra for an add-on to cover those activities, standard policy won't touch it.
Right. Yeah, what else?
Treatments for alcoholism, drug, or substance abuse are excluded, as are treatments you might receive in places like health hydros, nature cure clinics, spas.
So it has to be a recognized hospital or medical facility, not just a wellness retreat.
Exactly. The policy is very clear on where the treatment needs to happen.
Any of the surprising exclusions?
Well, maybe things like dietary supplements and substances that can be purchased without prescription. Those are generally out.
Even if a doctor suggests them?
Unless they are prescribed as an integral part of a covered hospitalization or daycare procedure claim, just buying vitamins off the shelf isn't covered.
Okay.
Also, treatment for refractive error needing glasses or contacts is usually excluded, especially if it's below a certain threshold, like 7.5 dioptries here.
Right. Standard vision correction isn't typically covered.
And unproven treatments, Anything experimental or lacking significant medical documentation to back it up, those are excluded too.
That makes sense. What about things like fertility treatments?
Generally excluded. The policy wording mentions sterility and infertility treatments. That includes things like contraception, sterilization, assisted reproduction like IVF, even gestational surrogacy. Those are typically outside the scope of basic health or cash policies.
Okay. And routine stuff, checkups, dental.
Mostly excluded. Routine exams, glasses, hearing aids, not covered. Dental treatment usually isn't covered either, unless it's required because of an accident and you need inpatient treatment for it.
So only accidental dental injury requiring hospitalization might be covered.
Correct. And then there are these really practical exclusions that highlight the fine print. Things listed like personal comfort, cosmetics, convenience, and hygiene-related items.
Comfort items, like,
Well, the policy later lists specific non-medical expenses that aren't payable.
the famous list of non-medical items.
Exactly. And it can include things you might not even think about. Baby food, carry bags, laundry charges, mineral water, even simple stuff like tissue paper or hair removal cream.
Wow. So all those little extras in a hospital room,
Hmm.
probably not covered.
Very likely not covered, or they're considered bundled into the room charge anyway. The policy is quite specific about these.
And what about alternative therapies? You mentioned ABOH hospitals are defined, but are all therapies covered?
Good question. While AEOH hospitals meeting the criteria might be covered for inpatient care, the permanent exclusions list often includes things like acupressure, acupuncture, magnetic, and such other therapies. So specific therapies might still be out even if the facility is recognized.
Tricky distinction. And what about domiciliary hospitalization, care at home?
Interestingly, even though the policy might define domiciliary hospitalization, it's often listed as a permanent exclusion in these types of cash benefit policies. So treatment at home, even if medically necessary, might not trigger the daily cash benefit here.
So just because it's defined doesn't mean it's covered. You have to check the exclusions too.
Always check the exclusions. That's the mantra.
But you mentioned there's some good news about waiving some waiting periods.
Yes, that's right. It's a crucial point. Some of those waiting periods we discussed, the 36 months for PED, the initial 30 days, the 12 months for specified diseases, even the 9 months for maternity, they can often be waived.
Oh,
Usually by opting for and paying extra for specific optional covers designed for that purpose, or sometimes through continuity benefits during renewal or porting. So there are pathways to get coverage sooner, but you need to look for them and likely pay for them.
okay, good to know there are options. So let's assume you understand the policy, the ins and outs. What happens when you actually need to use it, the claims process?
Right, the practical part. Navigating the claims process smoothly is vital. The first step is usually notification. For regular hospitalization claims, you typically need to notify the insurer pretty quickly, often within 48 hours of getting admitted.
48 hours, that's fast.
It is, and definitely no later than when you're discharged. For more serious things like accidental death, permanent total disablement, or critical illness claims, the window might be slightly longer, maybe 10 days from when it happened.
Okay, so prompt notification is key. What information do they need?
They'll need specific details about the event and the insured person, and the documentation required can vary a lot depending on the type of claim.
Like what?
Well, for instance, a broken bones claim will definitely require X-ray reports, maybe MRI or CT scans to prove the fracture,
Makes sense.
whereas a critical illness claim for cancer would need, say, histopathology reports confirming the diagnosis and severity. So keeping meticulous records of all medical documents is absolutely essential.
Good advice. Hold on to everything. Now, what if you have more than one policy, say, from different insurers?
The multiple policies scenario,
Yeah.
very common. The policy usually states that you, the policyholder, have the right to choose which insurer you want to approach first to settle the claim.
Okay, you choose who pays first.
Right. And crucially, you can then claim any amounts that the first insurer didn't pay, maybe because you hit a limit or certain things weren't covered under that policy, from your other insurer, subject to their terms, of course.
So your other policies can potentially pick up the slack. That's really useful.
It's a very important right for consumers.
On the flip side, what about fraud?
Well, the policy is very clear on that, as you'd expect. Any fraudulent claim, any false statement or hidden information intended to deceive, it voids the entire policy.
That's the whole thing.
Yes. And you forfeit any premiums paid. They take fraud very seriously. Honesty is completely non-negotiable.
Understood. Okay, what about managing the policy itself? Can you cancel it?
Yes, you as the policyholder can cancel it. Usually requires about 7 days notice. If you haven't made any claims, you typically get a proportionate refund of the premium for the remaining term.
And can the company cancel it?
They can, but usually only under specific circumstances, like proven misrepresentation or fraud. They typically have to give more notice, maybe 15 days. And if it's for fraud, you likely don't get any premium back.
Okay. Is there a cooling off period when you first buy a policy?
Yes, for new individual policies, there's usually a free look period.
Free look.
Yeah, typically 15 or sometimes even 30 days from when you receive the policy documents. It gives you time to read everything thoroughly. If you decide you don't want it after all, you can return it and get a refund. They might deduct a small amount for, say, a medical exam if one was done, or stamp duty, or a tiny bit for the risk cover provided during that short period.
So a chance to back out if you're not happy after reading the details.
Exactly. It's an important consumer protection.
What about the long term? Renewals.
Good question. Most health-related policies these days offer lifetime renewability. The insurer usually has to notify you well in advance, maybe 90 days before it expires, about the renewal terms.
Lifetime renewability is great.
It is. And you also usually have the option to migrate to other similar products offered by the same company if maybe your current plan is discontinued or your needs change.
Migrate. And do you keep your benefits, like waiting period served?
Generally, yes. You should retain continuity benefits, like credit for waiting periods already completed. That's a huge advantage of sticking with the same insurer when migrating.
Okay, that protects your long-term investment and coverage.
Mm.
Now, somewhere in the policy, it must define who can actually be insured.
Ah, yes, the eligibility criteria for an insured person. And in this particular policy wording, it's actually incredibly broad and quite progressive.
How so?
Get this list. It includes lawfully wedded spouse, but then adds more than one wife.
Really?
Yes, and then partner, including same-sex partners, and live-in partner.
Wow, same-sex partners and live-in partners explicitly included.
Yes, and it goes on. Children, biological adopted others, parents, biological foster, siblings, biological step, mother-in-law, father-in-law, son-in-law, daughter-in-law, brother-in-law, sister-in-law.
That is a very broad definition of family. It covers almost everyone imaginable.
It really does. It reflects a much more modern understanding of family structures, which is, frankly, quite refreshing to see in an insurance document.
Definitely. What about practicalities like paying premiums?
The document notes that premiums can often be paid in installments monthly, quarterly, half-yearly, not just annually. And there are usually grace periods if you miss a payment deadline.
Grace periods are helpful.
Very helpful. And there's another interesting protection called the moratorium period.
Moratorium. What's that?
After the policy has been in force continuously for a long time, this policy mentions 60 months, so 5 years.
Okay, 5 years.
After that period, the insurance company generally cannot contest claims based on non-disclosure or misrepresentation when you first bought the policy.
So after 5 years, they can't easily deny a claim saying you didn't tell them something back at the start?
Exactly. The only exception is if they can establish outright fraud. But otherwise, it provides a good degree of security that claims won't be disputed based on old application details after that long.
That seems like a significant protection for long-term policyholders.
It is. It aims to bring finality to the contract.
Okay, nearly there.
Hmm.
What if things go wrong? You have a complaint or a dispute with the claim.
The policy outlines the grievance redressal process. First step is always to approach the company's own grievance cell or customer service channels.
Try to resolve it internally first.
Right. But if you're still not satisfied with their response or resolution, then you have the right to take your complaint to the independent insurance ombudsman for your region.
The ombudsman.
Yeah.
An external authority.
Yes, it's an impartial office set up specifically to handle disputes between policyholders and insurers.
And what about claim settlement times? Is there a deadline for the insurer?
Yes, regulations usually mandate this. The policy likely states a maximum claim settlement period, often around 30 days from when they receive the very last necessary document from you.
30 days from getting all the paperwork.
Correct. And if they delay beyond that without a valid reason, they usually have to pay penal interest on the claim amount.
Okay, so there are timelines and consequences for delays. That's important for consumer protection.
Definitely.
Wow. We just went through a lot of detail from a document that honestly most people might just glance at.
We really did.
But by doing this deep dive, looking at the specific definitions, the different benefits, the crucial exclusions, all those operational clauses, you really see how much critical info is packed in there, stuff that genuinely impacts you.
Absolutely. We've seen how incredibly precise the language is and why that precision matters for claims. We've seen how you can customize a policy with optional covers and how vital it is to understand the fine print, like what actually counts as a hospital or which minor expenses aren't covered. That knowledge makes all the difference when you actually need the policy.
So what's the big takeaway for you listening to this? I think next time you face any kind of dense, legal-looking document, insurance, contract, even those online terms and conditions we all skip, maybe pause for a second. Consider this deep dive.
Yeah.
Ask yourself, what surprising, really impactful details might be hiding there in plain sight? Details that could genuinely affect your money, your rights, your well-being.
Because the power really is in that precision. The value is buried in the details. Keep asking those questions. Keep digging for those nuggets of knowledge. It transforms these daunting documents from, obstacles into actual tools you can use.